Hey everyone, my name's Dom, welcome to the channel. I hope you all had a great Christmas and New Year period, but now it's over, it's time to wrap up 2021, wrap up December and take a look ahead to January. So for this review and preview video, I'm going to take a little bit more of a look at the stats, just in terms of how 2021 looked as a whole. I'm not going to go into it in a great amount of detail, and as usual, I'll have this video split into sections, so you can use the timestamps and skip the stats section or any other section if you so wish. So taking a brief look at the December stats first of all, I read 4 books with a total page count of 1978, which gives an average of 495 pages per book, and I gave these books an average rating of 4 stars. The overall end of year figures gives me a page count of 21,705, and because I read 41 books within that page count, that gives me an average for the year of 529 pages, which I'm really happy with because I do like reading a nice big book. The average rating for the year as a whole was 3.87. So in terms of the series, you might have seen that I recently did a bit of a series review and I went through all of the series that I was in the middle of, and I've kind of pruned that list. DNF'd, I think I only DNF'd one of the ongoing series, but I did move a bunch of those series into what I've called a soft DNF category. So when I go forward in my 2022 wrap-up videos, I will cut out some of those titles and it will be a shorter overall list. But for the moment, I'll include those titles just for continuity with the rest of 2021's figures. And that means for the year as a whole, I started 18 different series. I DNF'd 4 and I finished 5. Total series that I'm up to date with is 10. And the total number of series that I class myself as being in the middle of at this point is now 28. So for the next wrap-up video, that number will reduce because I think it was 15 titles that I've taken out of that pot and moved into the soft DNF, so I won't be including those in the stats. So for the next wrap-up video, the figures will look a little bit skewed as I take out all of the start and finish and DNF for 2021, but also that bunch of soft DNF titles. And then to give you a bit of a look ahead as to whether there were any 5-star reads for December, the days since last 5-star read is sitting currently at 33 because the answer is no. The last 5-star read that I did have is this big guy here of Darkness and Light back at the end of November. So just to have a very brief look at those 41 titles I read last year, I'm not going to go into, as I say, any great detail on them because I don't want to bore myself, let alone bore you guys. What I will do though is just have a very quick look at the breakdown of those titles. So 41 books that I read over the course of a year, and that's a massive improvement for me because I've had some pretty low reading years, and in 2021 I just had a really fantastic year just in terms of the amount and the quality of the books that I was reading. Now, although I say a good quality year there, you might think that I'm mistaken on that because I said that my average rating for the year as a whole was 3.87. Now, I consider myself quite a harsh marker in that respect. So I guess just to put that into context a little bit, I read 41 books and I only gave 6 of those the full 5 stars. There were some really fantastic titles that I did read that I didn't quite get to 5 stars. There were 5 titles that I gave 4.5 stars to, for instance. And this, I guess, is because of the way that I view a star rating system, where if there were just some things that I just didn't agree with or I didn't like the way it worked in a book, then I would mark it down to 4.5 rather than 5. Most of my ratings for the year were either at 3.5, which had 12 titles, or 4 stars, which had 10 titles. Okay, so that's the stats out of the way. Let's have a look at the 4 titles that I did read in December. So this month was an even split with 2 sci-fi and 2 fantasy reads. The first of these to kick off my month was Velocity Weapon by Megan O'Keefe. This is book 1 of The Protectorate, and it's a series that I've been looking forward to reading for a long time, and I've just never got around to reading them. So especially because I've heard some really good feedback about this series from my friend Trinity over at Portable Magic, I thought December I'm going to start The Protectorate and I'm going to read Velocity Weapon. This turned out actually to be my lowest rated book of the month. I only gave it 3.5 stars because although it was enjoyable, it didn't quite tick all the boxes for me. I found that there were some good characters in it, but they were for me in the minority, and the majority of the characters that were there I didn't really care about. I didn't feel that they were developed enough, both in terms of the character themselves and also their storyline. So with this one, the two main characters are a brother and sister. We have Sander, who is a pilot, and she's out in a gunship which gets shot down, and she wakes up, I think it's about 300 years in the future, and she's been taken aboard an enemy ship. And it's kind of like a living ship controlled by essentially a sentient AI system. Meanwhile, her brother Biran is a politician and he's back on their homeworld, kind of pushing against the system to try and get ships to go out to this battlefield to try and find all of the troops, but most importantly, his sister, who's been lost in this great battle. His storyline I didn't enjoy quite as much. Sander was definitely my favourite character in this book. She was nice and snarky, and I do like that occasionally in a book that I'm reading. Biran I thought was an okay character, but not quite developed enough for me. There was then a third storyline with a character called Jules, which I just didn't really see a point in. I didn't feel that it gave anything to the storyline as a whole. It was more than anything, I feel that it was setting up a storyline for the second and or third book in the series. So that one was definitely disappointing to me, and overall that's kind of the feeling that I had for the book as a whole. Maybe it was because I was excited going into it and I was really looking forward to the series, but I just felt disappointed with this first book, and I immediately moved it into my soft DNF category because I will probably read the next book at some point, but I've got no priority to it. I just do not know when that's going to be. So I moved from Velocity Weapon to a fantasy title. I alternated this month, and the next book that I read was Legacy of Ghosts by Alicia Wanstall-Burke. This is book 2 of the Kreidik sagas. I read book 1, Blood of Heirs, in October, I think it was, to kick off my series of videos on Under the Radar reads. I did enjoy Blood of Heirs, and I thought that it was really building for book 2 to kick off and have some really exciting times. And although I enjoyed book 2, Legacy of Ghosts, I did sort of finish it with the same kind of mindset that I finished Blood of Heirs. I felt that it didn't quite get there, and I was still waiting for that big kind of epic set piece to kick off the entire series. So it was kind of a bit strange because I did overall enjoy, well, both books, but I did enjoy Legacy of Ghosts and gave it a higher rating at 4 stars than I did the 3.5 stars that I gave Blood of Heirs. It's kind of a weird series for me because of the way that these two books worked out, with the big kind of really exciting moments not quite there, and it kind of gives you the feeling that that's all coming in the next book. But as I say, I felt that at the end of book 1, so to feel it at the end of book 2 as well is a little bit strange, because overall I still feel like I quite enjoyed this series. So this one, as I say, I gave it 4 stars. I haven't done a dedicated video review, but what I'll do is link my Goodreads review in the description box below, so you can have a little bit more detail into my thoughts on this particular book if you do want to. The third book that I read in December was, as I said earlier, another sci-fi title then. It was This Guy, Mickey 7, which I do like this kind of minimalist cover that the advanced review copy has got. Normally the kind of retail edition will have the title here and the author name I think down at the bottom and a cover quote as well. So it's quite nice having this kind of bare cover. I do like when they have a little bit of a different cover for a review copy to set it aside from the retail ones. This I did have a dedicated review for, so you can go and check it out if you want to. I was really pleasantly surprised by this book. I read the synopsis and I thought it sounded quite interesting, which is why I requested a review copy of it. But actually when I was reading it, I found that it was better than I thought it was going to be. I read it in a few days. It's not the biggest of books, it's about 370 pages, but it did fly by over the course of just a couple of days, so I really had a good time with this one. The story here is a character, the title character in fact, Mickey, and he's called Mickey 7 because he's what's called an expendable. He's a disposable employee who goes out on all the kind of the nasty jobs, these suicide missions, and occasionally will die as a result. When he does, they just pop out a new copy of him, download his kind of brain, his memories into this new copy, and give him a new number. So Mickey has died 6 times. We're currently on Mickey 7 as at the point of this book. However, we do also get to see Mickey 8, because at the start of the book, Mickey 7 is lost and presumed dead, so they go through that process, produce Mickey 8, but then Mickey 7 turns up as well, and that causes a whole host of problems, because there should only be at any one time one Mickey. So this does lead to some interesting circumstances, and it's quite interesting as well to see the interactions between essentially 2 iterations of the same person. So it was a really good read, really fast paced. It's got some nice kind of thought provoking moments in it as well. I gave it 4 stars, and I'll really recommend it if you're in the market for a good, fast paced, fun sci-fi adventure. And then the 4th book that I read in December was another review copy, and this is Empire of Shadows, which is the 3rd book in the Kreidik Sagas by Alicia Wanstall-Berg. And where I was saying earlier on that it was kind of weird because I liked book 1 and 2 but felt that they had a little bit that was kind of missing, something I was kind of waiting for it all to kick off and to get to this real epic excitement, and book 3 really delivered on that. So I was really thrilled to find that everything that I wanted from this series I finally got in book 3. So it is definitely a bit of a weird one for me because overall I liked the series, even though I found that book 1 and book 2 were a little bit lacking in some areas, but it's definitely one of these series that is better when you consider all of the books together as opposed to looking at them individually. For book 3, I won't go too much into it because of A, spoilers, and B, I will put out a dedicated video review over the next few days. However, although I still had some small issues with this book, as I'll talk about in that video, I gave it 4.5 stars because it was altogether a really good read. It was proper kind of epic fantasy, and I really had a good time reading it. I did feel that there were a couple of issues that just stopped me from giving this book 5 stars, so didn't quite get there, but 4.5 stars for this title was a really good overall figure. So look out for the dedicated review on this one in the next few days anyway, and I'll be looking out to see what Alicia Wanstall-Berg puts out in the future because I have enjoyed my time reading her books. Okay, so moving on to what I'm going to read in January, and this is where it gets a little bit difficult for me because I've looked at it a couple of times and I've still not actually settled on what I'm going to read for the month. So continuing on my kind of theme from last year, I'm not going to set a solid TBR. It's going to be more a case of the MBR that might be read. I'll have a few titles that I will potentially look to choose from, but at any one time there might be some things that'll come from outside of that little pot and take my interest instead. There are a couple of titles that I will definitely focus on in January, however, so we'll start off with those. The first of these is a review copy for another book which is due out in February, and this is The Justice of Kings by Richard Swan. This one I've seen a lot of people reading already, and I've literally not heard a bad word about it. Everyone says that it's absolutely amazing. It's going to be one of the big kind of buzz books in the community for 2022. So I'm looking forward to it in that respect, but at the same time I'm kind of thinking, oh, I'm probably not going to like it then. I am about 10% into this at the moment. I started it yesterday afternoon and it's not really gone anywhere as yet. We're dealing with essentially, I guess, an emperor's magister going around and kind of hearing cases and making judgments and things like that. And he's got a little crew with him. So we've got on the one hand a taskman who is kind of, I guess, an assistant. And on the other hand, we've got a young clerk who is the person who's actually telling the story. So although the magister character called Von Volt is the main character of the book, it's actually told through the eyes of his young clerk. So she's the character who we're actually in the head of even though she's not seen as the main character of the book. So that's quite interesting, and I'm looking forward to seeing how that pans out and how it develops as the book goes on. But as I say, I'm 10% through at the moment. We've just come upon a town where the wife of the Lord has been murdered a couple of days before, and now we're going to start investigating what happened and ultimately who murdered her, and I presume why. So can't say too much about this one at the moment because I'm not really that far into it and it hasn't really started moving yet at a great pace. But so far the writing style seems okay, and I feel like I should at the very least be able to enjoy this book. So every so often as a reviewer I do receive books from authors or from publishers, so I've already gone through a few advanced review copies in this video. I've also had a few copies which are not advanced copies. They are books that have already been released that the author has sent to me for consideration. So although these aren't specifically kind of given as review copies, for me that's kind of implicit, and I will review these, if nothing else, as a courtesy to the author because they have provided these books to me. So I'm going to put some priority on these and read, I think, one per month over the next few months for the titles that I've currently got in hand. And the first of these is a digital copy of Paladin Unbound by Jeff Spate. So I read the synopsis of this a while ago, completely forgot what was in it, and then had a conversation with the author on Twitter, and he offered me a copy of the book to read. So I thought I'll take it on. I'm not going to go back and reread what the synopsis was all about. I just remember when I looked at it, it sounded quite interesting, so I did put it in my kind of Goodreads want to read list. And I'm kind of making the conscious effort actually to go into it blind because I don't want to kind of read it and find out anything about what the storyline's going to be about, because sometimes it's nice to have a surprise and hopefully it'll be a pleasant one. So then after those two books, this is where it kind of gets a little bit interesting for me because it's a bit of a free-for-all. So the other thing that I've decided that I'm going to do is at least one book per month that I look to read is going to come from my 2022 reading goals. But I've got a handful that I'm quite excited for that are available at the moment that I'm probably going to be choosing from as one of my January reads. So these are titles that I'm either already in the series with and I want to continue. So with those we have Royal Assassin, book 2 of the Farseer. We have Words of Radiance, book 2 of the Stormlight Archive, and this one, because I do have just above my head the split volumes, I might break this into two depending on how I feel whenever I do get to this series again. We also have another couple of books that are on that shelf just above my head. We've got the third book of the Lacanius, which is The Light of All That Falls, which is a pretty chunky book. There's 800 and so pages in that one, but I have just bought myself a physical copy of that, so that's definitely on the cards as well. And the one next to it on the shelf up there is We Ride the Storm by Devin Madsen. I've got the third book sitting next to it. The second book is on its way to me because I've treated myself to that one as well. So that one is titled We Lie With Death. So those are kind of the four. In fact, there's a fifth, Caliban's War, book 2 of The Expanse, which I've got on my Kindle. Makes up a fifth of the titles that I want to continue with this year, but I'm putting kind of in the pot for me to choose from as one of my January reads. I've then also got one other title from that 2022 goals video that I'm going to include in this little pot, and that is Dragon Mage by M.L. Spencer, because I've been really looking forward to reading this book for a while and I just haven't got round to it, so I'm going to put some priority to it and look to read it probably in Q1 this year, so I can finally tick that one off the list of books that I'm really looking forward to read. Okay, so there's December wrapped up, there's January kicked off. I've got some good titles that I'm really excited for, and I'm hoping that I'm going to see more 5-star reads this year as well. Let me know in the comments down below how your December went and what you're looking to read in January. I hope I'll see you again in another video soon, but until then, as always, take care of yourselves, read some good books. Bye for now.